Sport can teach you a lot about life, especially team games, where an appreciation of tactics and strategic thinking is vital if you're going to be successful. So one of the things that I've learnt is that it's necessary at times to change your tactics and your strategy, for the simple reason that your opponent will learn about what you're trying to achieve and adapt their game in response to what you're trying to do. And therefore, like, strategies and tactics have a shelf life. They only work for so long. So what happens then when somebody's sussed you out? Well, obviously what you've got to try and do is come up with a new strategy when the old one stops working. I guess another analogy would be in theatre, that you can't play the same show all the time because the audience just, their attention span is limited and they get bored of that show, and you have to, bring in a new production, otherwise your ticket sales fall. So looking back at it from, say, the year 2000, the main strategy that they used was fear based around errorism, spelt with a T. And over my lifetime, this has been their favourite tactic. It's almost like a football team whose default method of playing is the long ball. That's what they really, really love. But then in 2020, they decided to change their tactics, presumably because their old tactic of errorism, it wasn't producing the results that they wanted, and they pivoted and they tried a new tactic, which was the biomedical fascism. The thing about that was it was quite audacious, and the life cycle of that strategy was a lot shorter than with errorism, and people quickly saw through that tactic. So using like a sporting analogy, it would be like a football team switching to playing wing backs. It might work in the short run, but then teams quickly find a way of countering it, and it's pretty obvious what you're trying to do. So the biomedical fascism stops working, as I say, by 2022. So then they need to come up with something new. And that something new was Putin, Zelensky, Ukraine, all of that stuff. Didn't work too well at all. Didn't work too well. It was like a football team that's maybe got like a load of big guys, big athletes who were no good at actual ball control and stuff. And then a manager comes in and tells them to play possession-based football. It just didn't work at all. The tactic just did not work. And they've abandoned this. So here's the point. From what I know about sport, what I remember about sport is that if you're up against an opponent and they've maybe got 3 different strategies, their default strategy, and then they've tried out 2 new funky strategies, and in sheer desperation, none of them have worked, and in sheer desperation, they've gone back to plan A, that tells me that your opponent is demoralised and they're beaten. And basically what we're seeing now is a return to the original strategy of errorism. Why do I say that? Well, basically, you could see the Palestine Israeli thing, which is obviously a fake flag. That's a primer, I think, for this reversion to the original strategy, which is the old errorism spelt with a T. And because what they're going to do is try to go back to fear again, fear of being blown up by errorists. So last night there was a football match. I think it was in Belgium. As these images of an alleged errorist shooting people, Swedish football fans. There was various images going around on social media where you've got super steady cameras on tripods capturing the exact moments when shots are fired, and for me it just smacks completely of a setup. So yeah, they're desperate. What type of opponent? They've tried out new strategies. They tried out the Divic 91. They tried out Putin. None of it's working. So they have to go back to the tried and tested trusty formula, which is errorism, you know. The problem for the globalists, though, is that it's not like when they first used errorism and they took people by surprise, you know, like with the big 9 event and all the stuff that happened immediately after that. It worked because it took people by surprise. It was the first time we'd seen this opponent use this particular strategy. It's not going to work nowhere near as well this time around because we know far more about them. We've seen this strategy before. We know exactly what type of stunts and what type of tactics they're going to play to enact their strategy. So it's not going to work nowhere near as well for them. So that's the first point that I want to make, is these guys are desperate. The fact that they're having to revert back to their original strategy of errorism, it's like a long ball team that got sussed out. They tried to play a possession-based football, wing backs. None of it's worked, and in sheer desperation, they've had to go back to the original strategy of long ball. In every single situation like that, it never works because the opponent is ready for you, and they're just laughing at you because they know that you're desperate, and they know this because you've had to go back to plan A, and plan A never worked anyway, or it stopped working, and that's why you had to try plan B and C and D. And the fact that you had to revert back to plan A shows that you're failing. The other thing that I think must be said too is for me personally, I've completely revised my understanding of recent history. Yeah, and I'll admit it. For a while, I actually believed that the errorists were really followers of a particular religion, and again, it's very uncomfortable for me to admit this, but for a while, I did believe this line of, you know, extremists. Let's call it the religion of peace. Yeah. That these people, there was extremists who belonged to this religion, and yeah, they did errorist attacks. I actually believe that. I've now changed my mind. I now believe that many of these attacks were carried out by the government or people acting on behalf of the government. Let's call it the deep state, say. So who's actually doing it? Well, a few ideas, basically. Within society, there's always psychopaths and sociopaths who will literally do anything for money. And if you pay them enough, they'll do it. And maybe some of them will get a kick out of doing it too. Maybe like driving a big truck down a seafront and killing a lot of people. Maybe there are some psychopaths that would do that. Maybe without the need for a monetary payment. The other thing is that you can maybe bring in people from abroad, like let's call them, say, mercenaries. You know, that's what mercenaries do. They're paid money and then they kill people, and yeah, that's just who they are. So I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that the deep state could find willing accomplices for the crimes that they want to commit, and then of course, you know, they can blame it on a particular religious group. Maybe they can find psychopaths who actually maybe they have the same ethnicity as many people who believe in this particular religion that you're going to kind of scapegoat. So then, you know, on the way down here, you start thinking about all the people that have crossed the English Channel on rubber boats. What are they doing? Or are they here for the cash? Yeah, definitely. They don't go to England for the weather. So what are they going to be paid money to do? It's interesting. So unfortunately, people could end up being killed. Like, I don't doubt, you know, there's a good chance that there were people that died last night in Brussels, and it wasn't a complete fabricated event. There's a very, very good chance of that. So, you know, you might say, well, why do you think their strategy is going to fail? And my response to that would be to say, well, what they actually really want is to provoke like a civil war. Let's call it what it is. You know, the UK is for right or wrong. It is a multicultural society. There's a lot of people of a particular religion that gets blamed for errorism living in Britain. What they want to try and do through these fake flags and various staged errorism events is to see if they can get one group of people living in Britain to fight another group of people living in Britain. And personally, I don't think that they're going to succeed in that. They're not. You know, again, you can think about the grooming gang things. I'm now starting to doubt some of that. Is that really a huge problem of the scale as described by the Daily Mail? Can I actually trust the Daily Mail to accurately report on the grooming gang stuff? I'm no longer, you know, it's just sounds ridiculous even saying it, doesn't it? Like, how can anyone trust the Daily Mail or the BBC on anything? Plus, obviously, you have the fridge magnets as well. How many of these people that were, you know, kicking off about various things, how many of these people are actually genuine, or how many of them are alternative mainstream fridge magnets, as Dom from Sheep Farm calls them? You know, and their role is to stoke up ultimately a civil war. So, like, in conclusion, what I would say to people is, don't automatically assume that what you see in the mainstream, or even what you see from high-profile alternative media figures. You know, people who've got, I don't know, 500,000 subscribers and stuff like that. I know from myself, from how the YouTube algorithm works, is that there's no way that genuine people get to that level of subscriber count. That they've got there because, you know, the establishment is happy for them to be there. Maybe they're controlled. So personally, what I'm urging people to do is just to keep a level head and not blindly hate other people, and do take into account the possibility that this errorism is, a lot of it is actually being carried out by the deep state itself. And I guess for them, their ultimate dream would be for people to be conned into taking up arms against Christians or Jews or whatever. That would, because then you actually have some real errorists rather than mercenaries who are just doing it for money. More credible that way. So in the last week or two, they've tried something new, which is the Israel-Palestine thing. And again, what I'm very pleased with is that on both sides, on both the Muslim side in the UK and Christians, Jews, whatever, atheists, there hasn't been the hate fest that the globalists were wanting to create. People have stayed in the main pretty level-headed, and this kind of Israel invasion psyop, it's not worked as nearly as well as the globalists were hoping. That's my view, and that gives me a massive amount of optimism. Yeah, so from my sporting days, you can identify a desperate opponent because they're constantly swapping and switching strategies because nothing seems to be working for them. And their last desperate act is like to just go back to plan A, you know, their old tried and trusted formula that had stopped working, which is why they started experimenting in the first place. And that's all I want to say today, so God bless.